We are
All right.
streaming, and I'll kick it back to you, Amy.
Okay.
We are live. I will call this meeting to order. Council and attendees, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. We are live. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Very good. Amy, I see everyone on, but just for good record keeping, can you call attendance?
Yes. President Garrett,
Present.
Vice President Traylor,
Present.
Councilor Burke,
Present.
Councilor Choi,
Here.
Councilor Culp,
Here.
Councilor Melton,
Present.
and Councilor Plunkett.
Here.
Very good. We have the approval of the memorandum of the August 17th, 2020 regular meeting. A copy has been posted. Any questions on that memorandum? If not, I'll make a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Second from Councilor Plunkett. Amy, you know the drill?
President Garrett,
Yes.
Vice President Traylor,
Yes.
Councilor Burke,
Yes.
Councilor Choi,
Yes.
Councilor Culp,
Yes.
Councilor Melton,
Yes.
and Councilor Plunkett.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. The memorandum of the August 17th, 2020 regular town council meeting is approved by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Next up, we have an approval of a memoranda of the August 24th, 2020 executive session meeting. Copy has also been posted for that. Any questions on that?
I move to approve.
Was that Councilor Melton?
Second. Choi.
I'm sorry, who was it?
Choi.
It was Councilor Choi. I'm sorry. Got a first from Councilor Choi, second from Councilor Plunkett.
Sure.
Very good. Amy?
President Garrett,
Yes.
Vice President Traylor,
Yes.
Councilor Burke,
Yes.
Councilor Choi,
Yes.
Councilor Culp,
Yes.
Councilor Melton,
Yes.
and Councilor Plunkett.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. The memoranda of the August 24th, 2020 executive session town council meeting is approved by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Next, we have request to speak. Anyone who's wishing to speak may choose to raise their hand electronically and we will call on you.
And we
Amy,
do have one.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
If you could promote Mr. Triscari.
Should be back on in just a second here. There he
There
is.
we go. Mr. Triscari, I see you in the meeting. I think you know the drill, but please give your name and address for the record. I'll start your time after that. You have 3 or 6 minutes, depending if you are speaking for yourself or yourself and your spouse.
Good evening. My name is Craig Triscari. I live at 3270 Paddock Road. As of 7/20/2020, Van Trust has still failed to run an 8-inch water line into Saratoga after the November 2018 ordinance passing. Van Trust is in violation and total disregard to the Zionsville commitment letter. It seems this company is incapable of holding to a commitment, and the board fails to enforce their own public commitments to the community of Perry Township and Zionsville Rural. Other violations in phase 1 include tree sizes along the berm, which seem to fail to meet the height requirement for the majority of evergreen. It was 8 feet. That's what we negotiated. I'm sure Van Trust has plenty of excuses. I'm not sure once again there will be any follow through from the town to ensure they meet their commitment or exceed their commitment versus continuously falling short and making excuses. People in the town should know that you enforce your own commitments and ordinances. In this case, you have not. You have had at least a year or so, 2019, to do this. For this meeting, I do see another tax giveaway for the 140,000 square foot industrial facility on 267 in Southern Perry Township. I also see that you have presented a 55% tax break versus a 50% tax break giveaway. I understand the incentive. I would hope you will correct the last 3 tax giveaways for the multi-million square feet, 5-story industrial warehouse projects that are right next to the Perry Township, Lebanon, Zionsville home subdivisions, which is nearly $10 million lost revenues of those 3 properties in the 10 years of that failing Van Trust developer in phase 1. Received a letter from the mayor after talking to one of our neighbors. Maybe this is the first time your town actually reached out to address the issues of what's plaguing this community in the last 36 months. Just a few issues for the mayor. Thanks for inviting us to your parks, but we're in Zionsville Park. We're in industrial park. The last 24 months, it's built around us. What are you doing to make our community whole again after damaging it? You had a comprehensive plan. You ignored it. Why should the community believe that you're going to come up with another one? What have you offered us that adds value to our community after damaging it? If you plan to buy a home within Zionsville address, be very cautious. The leadership doesn't abide by comprehensive plans, nor do they care about the property value. Homeowners on 421 near Highway look to reduce your taxes in Zionsville based on the development. This leadership includes the town council team, has provided to date 0 value added to the greater rural Zionsville community. I'm looking for value added, guys. Don't see it in the 2 years that we're doing this, to include that line, that one line, an 8-inch line.
Mr. Triscari, that was 3 minutes. Are you speaking on behalf of your wife or no?
No, that's it. Thank you for giving me.
Okay. Thank you. The tree thing is new to me. I will reach out to find out about that. Appreciate your time here today. I don't see any other hands raised, so we will move on to old business, to which there is none. So we'll move on to new business. First up is an order of demolition for all structures in a continuous order of enforcement. This is for 4075 South 875 East. This is a public hearing. Mr. DeLong, I believe you are already in the meeting and can speak to this matter.
Yes, I can, and thank you. Good evening. This matter would sound familiar to most of you, if not all of you. This is a matter that was dealt with earlier this year with the demolition of 4075 South 875 East. This is coming back to you to create what's called a continuous order, and that continuous order will facilitate the town's ability to capture funds that are expended, soft costs, if you will, professional fees, in addition to the cost of the demolition, to all be captured and archived and recouped from the party that owns the ground. Without this action, we were limited in what we could recoup. Going through this step here, this extra step, this continuous order step is necessary and is associated with our ability to capture those funds. I'm happy to take any questions. This is a public hearing, as you mentioned. The notice has been provided. Certified mailings were also sent to the individuals who own the property, and I'm happy to take any questions.
And one quick note before we go, I failed to see, I think there was a second hand raised from Allison Gutwine for the request to speak. Allison, if you hang on, when we get through this issue, I will go back to that if that's okay with this council and let you have your 3 minutes on whatever topic you'd like to talk about. So hang tight. I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand in time before we moved on. Anyways, any questions for Mr. DeLong on this matter? Craig, go ahead.
Do we have a total cost that we are approving for this? You have the demo costs, and then you said the soft costs. Is there a total in that at this point, or is this for future?
This will be for future. This will be for future. We do not have the current costs identified for the demolition. We'll go out for bids, if you will, post this meeting, and certainly after any subsequent timing that needs to pass, and then we'll move forward with that project.
So this includes the demolition costs, any other legal fees? Is that correct?
Correct. We're going to capture any fees that are incurred with this effort and place that as a lien against the property, and that could include mowing, postage, paper, professional fees, in addition to the demolition.
Does this go all the way back to 2011 when some of those initial things came through?
No, this would not reach back that far. No, it would
Okay.
not.
So it's basically since we voted on this last time, moving forward, we'll capture those costs.
To the extent we can go back that far, yes.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, thank you.
Certainly. Thank you.
Very good. As councilors may think of other questions, I do want to state that this is a public meeting. And if I can do this correctly, I want to show proof of publication. You should be seeing my screen with the publisher's affidavit of proof of publication of this public meeting. Stop sharing. If there's anyone in the public who would like to speak on this agenda topic, please raise your hand and you will have time to speak on this. I do not see any hands raised. I will close then this public hearing and leave it open to councilors if there's any other questions you have for Mr. DeLong on this issue.
Hey, Wayne, just having gone through this earlier in the year, what kind of expectation should we have for getting the bid process and actually getting that building down?
It should be rather quick. The bidding process will be a solicitation. We've been working on that packet, so we'll be reaching out to parties very quickly, and certainly as many parties as we can reach and talk with, so we can get a very good price. I'm not here tonight to offer a timeline per se, but I think we're very anxious to move this ball forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I know that there's other folks anxious. I get emails regularly about this place, so I appreciate it. Thanks.
Understood. Thank you.
Well, short of any other questions, I would take a motion on this
I'll make a
matter.
motion to approve.
First from Vice President Trailer, second from
President
Councilor
Garrett.
Burke. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry, just to clarify, did you open the public hearing and close it already?
I did. I
Okay.
can open. Yeah, we opened it, showed the proof of publication, asked
Got
for
it.
anyone, and then
Just wanted,
closed it. So
I heard that part, but I didn't hear it close, so I just wanted to double
Yep.
check. So
no,
sorry
I
to
appreciate
interrupt.
that. Yep, no problem. So I had first from Vice President Trailer, Councilor Burke. Did I see a second from you?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Lacey, I'll throw it back to you.
President Garrett,
Yes.
Vice President Trailer,
Yes.
Councilor Burke,
Yes.
Councilor Choi,
Yes.
Councilor Culp,
Yes.
Councilor Melton,
Yes.
and Councilor Plunkett.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Amy. The order of demolition, continuous order of enforcement is approved by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Next, we have an ordinance establishing a Department of Public Works and creating the positions of Director of Public Works and Division Supervisors.
Hey, Josh, before we move on, did you want to
Oh, yeah. I'm
get
sorry.
Allison in
Awesome.
here?
Let me back that up. That's a good point. Thank you for reminding me. Allison, we'll go back to the request to speak. I'm sorry, I saw your hand go up and then I didn't get to you. So same rules as Mr. Triscari. If you can give your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Sure. Hi, I'm Allison Gutwein of the Zionsville Chamber of Commerce. We are located at 1100 West Oak Street, Suite 214. The Zionsville Chamber of Commerce is proud to be working for our members this year. We are extremely appreciative of the support from the council and Town of Zionsville that has fostered a working relationship that has allowed for events like Night on the Bricks and the Rainbow Hope Tree. We are honored to be featured on Fox 59 for our Keep the Lights On campaign, which had been viewed by over 30,000 people and generated income for our business community during a time when it was most needed. In April, we polled our members, and at the time of the poll found that only 33% had received any funding from the PPP program. As a result, we contacted local, state, and federal officials to encourage direction with regard to the PPP program and the need for it to support small businesses. This donation was matched by our board. So Councilor Choi gave money for all of our members and our membership to have videos made that would help with marketing this year. We were also able to make grants to the Boys and Girls Club and Watch Us Farm. Recently, we were awarded the ICEA Excellence in Communications Regional Marketing Award for our work with our members. And this year alone, we have seen membership grow by nearly 100 businesses that saw value in our services and the visibility offered through a partnership with the Chamber. Why is all of this important? Why is hosting an event like Brick Street Market or Christmas in the Village critical to our town? Why is increased marketing visibility needed? According to the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, which conducted a survey of small businesses earlier this year, they estimate that if the COVID crisis lasts for more than 6 months, it will lead to 3.5 million job losses in Indiana alone. While workers will surely find new jobs, these projections suggest that over the United States, the scale of job dislocation could be larger than anything America has experienced since the Great Depression and larger than the impact of the 1918 influenza epidemic. Our membership is comprised of 83% small businesses, and we don't want to follow this same trend. We know that businesses need traffic, either virtually or in person. That's why the Zionsville Chamber has worked with ZWorks Graduate to launch a new site that will allow shoppers to reserve products to try on in person or shop and check out locally from one site through shop@zionsvillechamber.com. Our events bring traffic by the doors of businesses all over town. To stay for a vacation, to bring friends, to spend the day. We have a charming atmosphere and a steady business backbone and shops that have sustained for years. Still, this is a year that is trying the ability of small business owners to maintain their steadfastness. Closures, decreased traffic flow, and the uncertain future will bring new challenges daily. Our partnership with the town council and town are critical to ensuring that these businesses stay supported, visible, and viable. We know that our organization represents the strong amongst us and that the best businesses have to offer. We want to keep our businesses here supported for years to come, and that takes the help of everyone. We will continue to work for our members.
That's 3 minutes, sorry. I want to be fair to everyone, but appreciate all the work that you and the Chamber have done. So thank you so much.
You bet.
Thanks for joining us today. Sorry to cut you off.
That's okay.
Rules are rules.
Yep.
Okay. Brian, thanks for not letting me forget Allison there to talk about the Chamber. We are still
before we move on, I would invite Allison to get with you and Amy about potentially getting on the agenda in an upcoming meeting where we'll be able to allow her more than the standard 3 minutes for a speaker, and they can give a full-fledged presentation on what the Chamber is doing in the community, because we know they're doing great work. It's great to hear it.
That's a good idea, and it allows for questions from the counselors as well. So we'll work on that. Allison, if you want to work with Amy Lacey on that, we can get that scheduled. So we are on new business item B. I'll state it again just so we all remember. This is an ordinance establishing a Department of Public Works and creating the positions of Director of Public Works and Division Supervisors. This is a first reading and is ordinance number 2020-09. I've got a number of people listed here that may speak, including Mayor Styron, Tammy Happert, Lance, and Deputy Mayor Johns Cole, who will be sharing a PowerPoint, I believe, with us. I see the Mayor, I see Julie, I see Lance.
Good evening.
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Tammy too.
I don't see. Oh, there's Tammy. Great. There is everyone. Julie, are you going to be leading up this charge here, or I'll let you decide?
Just helping with the presentation. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen and then I'll hand it over to Mayor Styron and Lance. So one moment here. I can get this right. And there we go.
We see your screen now.
All right, good evening. Tonight, we are asking for your support in the creation of a Department of Public Works. This proposed department will blend the services currently provided through our streets, stormwater, and wastewater teams, as well as an engineering division. That's going to be a new item. A Department of Public Works enables our staff to build internal efficiencies, to reduce our reliance on contracted services, and to increase our capacity to problem solve larger infrastructure issues before they become service provision problems. The professional synergy that can develop in a public works department will capitalize on those skills. Unique to each individual, yet when organized as a team, yield a more powerful value together working in coordination. We're looking to Lance to lead this team with the same expert care that he has demonstrated in the streets and stormwater department for decades. I invite you to hear directly from him how we envision moving forward with this proposed organizational change. And we, again, appreciate so much your time and consideration. Lance is up next.
All right. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor Styron, for that introduction, and thank you, Town Council, for allowing this on your agenda this evening. Before you tonight, for your consideration, is an ordinance creating a Department of Public Works and certain positions therein. I will note that this does not immediately place anyone in these new positions, but creates the framework for the mayor to implement staff advancements. I would start things out by reminding everyone that pursuant to the town resolution 2014-11, which was our last reorganization effort, there were specific language included in that contemplated this exact change. And conversations at the time were that we eventually needed to go to a cohesive Department of Public Works structure. So this is something that has been contemplated to the extent that we put it in the reorganization the last time we did this. Of course, this is a transition plan. Transitions are a form of governance. The whole point of reorganization is to make advancements to the positive in our governance and our services to the public. And the Public Works Department, this construct is common. Most cities have a Department of Public Works to coordinate themselves internally and externally. Even our neighbor to the west has a Public Works. So it's not uncommon, and we're certainly not reinventing any wheel. It's just time to put this wheel on our car. Obviously, we measure town expenses as the town grows. The bigger we are, the more services we provide. And I need to change my window view so I can see the entire screen. We can save money by building talent in-house instead of relying on so many outsourced tasks. Next slide, please. So I'm very excited to be part of this new horizon of opportunity for the town and the many, many benefits I see it. And I see the creation of a DPW bringing to both our internal and external customers. Now, most of you are probably familiar to some degree with our 6 kind of core service areas, those being the street department and the stormwater department, which have historically functioned as a singular unit since the stormwater department was created many years ago. Wastewater is a department evident, should be obvious to most folks, fairly straightforward, and they work largely independently. Now, facilities management, that's the management of our buildings and grounds, our buildings that we work in, everything from mechanical infrastructure to making sure things are mowed, landscaped, manicured, et cetera, which has recently expanded from what was initially solely a fire department and town hall-based function to a town-wide operations. Currently one person who is now consolidating contracts for economies of scales and efficiencies, procurement for services to make sure our buildings keep working, and managing that process town-wide. Right-of-way management is something that probably may not be as familiar to everyone, but this is currently an individual who is housed within the street and the stormwater department. And this person works closely every day to coordinate and oversee the many activities by outside agencies along our public ways. Now, these are mostly utilities and they're constantly interrupting our world, but it also includes asset management such as street sign inventories, traffic signal operations, and such. Rounding out these core infrastructure needs is the Environmental Stewardship Initiative. Now, this is a new effort spearheaded by the mayor, which is basically a holistic review and accounting or a quantification of all of our town and community actions to identify means to reduce our carbon footprint and lessen the impact, the negative impacts on our environment. This is very similar to a program that's been in place for a number of years through our Stormwater Quality Management Plan, which we have to have according to the EPA. And that is, as a municipality, we must make sure that our actions every day doesn't do anything to pollute our water sources locally. So while that has been specific to our water sources, this environmental stewardship initiative takes that same concepts and makes it much more broad, so that it can capture all of our activities and we can be good stewards of our environment. Now, these 6 core areas, they enjoy obviously cross communication. Everybody talks to everybody, and some limited active coordination in the past. There is some modest equipment sharing and some cross training amongst individuals in different departments who perform similar tasks. But we have always worked under a culture of assumptions. You always figure everybody knows what I'm doing, and I think I know what everybody's doing. You know, does the right hand always know what the left hand is doing? We can always improve our own internal operations, and that's one of the goals under this structure. If we have the next slide, please. And this is a slowly advancing slide. So the question is, what does a DPW look like? Well, we just talked about the 6 core areas, so it's fairly predictable. But what this does, go ahead, next, charges one person or an office to coordinate and orchestrate the projects and initiatives across multiple departments. This creates a clarity of message both internally and to outside agencies on whom to contact with our neighboring entities. We have municipal neighbors, government neighbors all around. There's very limited outside coordination. We're so obsessed and consumed with our own internal operations that we often forget that Indianapolis could do something right down the road that could affect us. So the DPW will serve as a face of all operations and manage the public messages. And frankly, it doesn't really cost anything to kind of reorganize the way we're doing things right now with the staff we have. So this all starts, next please, with a director working under the authorities of the mayor and the policy of the town council, who in this case oversees supervisors of divisions. Now, we started to talk about these 6 core areas, and of course, our wastewater department would become the wastewater division led by a supervisor. In this case, Barry Cook, many of whom you know, who is currently the wastewater superintendent, would continue on in the capacity of a division supervisor. Below that, not much changes operationally. Next, please. Again, under this structure, we have the environmental stewardship just discussed. Next, please. Our facilities management division will answer to the public works director as well as help coordinate the activities in there. And next, please. Yes, something near and dear to my heart, the streets and stormwater departments, which are currently separate entities but operate singularly, will now operate even more independently. And the existing people who serve, right now we have an assistant superintendent of streets and assistant superintendent of stormwater. Those 2 individuals will assume the roles of division supervisor, and along with that will come some more roles and responsibilities, but they will work to a greater extent to manage the daily operations. Next, please. Rounding out then again of our core 6 established services, we have the right-of-way manager. And this is not looking to add a division or personnel, but this person will have to work closely with all of the elements of a public works department, but specifically wastewater, stormwater, streets, and utilities, performing those duties that I enumerated previously. So that's our core 6. Brings it under the direction of the public works. So what's really new? Next, please. We do foresee the need for an executive administrative assistant, and this person will obviously support the efforts of the DPW and its coordination. Next, please. And finally, what is exciting, almost thrilling to me, is this new division of engineering. And a large portion of the content for the rest of this presentation is going to focus on the capacity that builds for our organization. Next, please. Well, I will highlight that executive assistant is a new position as a direct result of the DPW to manage the office and communications internally and externally. However, initially, this role may actually be fulfilled by the existing administrative assistant within the street and stormwater departments. Of course, depending on workload, this will eventually be needed as a standalone position. Again, engineering, a division supervisor, as well as 1 staff engineer are contemplated with this reorganization. Now, engineering could be created as a standalone 7th independent core service area, but this new group needs oversight and coordination across the existing departments within Public Works, not to mention the other departments that still exist within a town, such as planning. The planning department is one of the biggest users for engineering services across town, and we can't plunk down a new group without leadership, guidance, and continual direction from a technical aspect. And a little bit of, we've talked about, people, that's the structure proposed. This DPW will coordinate projects internally and externally and manage across all the disciplines. But we always want to talk about people. There's structure and there's positions, but there's also people. As I mentioned previously with wastewater, not much changes for operations below the supervisor level. Within this reorganization, there are 2 existing department heads that would experience changes. As I previously mentioned, our wastewater superintendent, Barry Cook, would assume the role of the wastewater division supervisor. There are way too many syllables in all this. And of course, if you'll notice, my position, which is currently the street and stormwater department superintendent, does not appear within this structure. And as the mayor indicated, I would take many of my duties with me and serve in the capacity of the director of public works. And just a little brief explanation on the color coding. You can see in the brownish hue, we've talked about new engineers and a new executive administration and a new director of public works. But since I developed this organization chart to also assist in the preparation of the 2021 budget, I've also included a couple of other new positions that are needed irrespective of an organization just because of capacity demands. That being a senior stormwater tech, that stormwater division is taxed to its maximum day on a day-to-day basis. And we're looking at a facilities management technician to assist in eliminating some of the maintenance contract needs for our buildings and performing those in-house. And finally, wrapping this up, the environmental stewardship division is not currently a staffed division. This is largely a community-based, a community input development process. So the director of public works would serve as the ordinance provides for as the division supervisor of the environmental stewardship. Next slide, please. So, excuse me. So why do this, right? You're going to hear me talk a lot about engineering. Engineering is a much needed value add. Most communities our size and larger have staff engineers. Now, these aren't necessarily to design large projects, but staff engineers are there for technical support and as in-house service providers in various capacities. Now, frankly, my head kind of began to spin in a good way when I thought about all the possibilities. But to keep this simple and on one slide, I've offered some key highlights here where I can foresee great advancements being made, again, mostly by the addition of an engineering staff. You can see 2 categories in there, support category or support capacities and added capacities. Support capacities are what I call what we're doing now, but what we must do better. And then added capacities are things that we are not doing now that we can be doing to save money. And you can see in the, what I hope appears to you to be the greenish font with the asterisk, those are areas where we have identified cost reduction, lessening the expenses to the town categories, and then black without any symbolism are value add, capacity add that really are cost neutral. And then we have a couple that I admit we are going to need some additional funding for, but I'll get into more of those details here in a moment. Within the support capacities, the first 2 are largely in support of our planning department. As I mentioned, they're a huge user of engineering services. And currently those engineering services are provided by our town contracted engineer in this case, and in recent times it's been Beam Longest and Neff. Now, to get a little bit by way of an explanation on how the planning department will be supported by this structure and this added capacity through engineering, when a development project is brought to the town, it must be reviewed as thoroughly as necessary to make sure it's compliant with our ordinances from zoning down to construction, as well as the technical standards. Now, currently, we have to outsource that 100%. We don't have the capacity in-house to do that. And this creates what you may have heard of as our pass-through fee structure, meaning that once a project has been filed with the town, Our town engineer creates an account, and any expenses they incur on the review of this project are billed to the town, and we pay our town consultant engineer. We then take that invoice, turn right around and bill the developer for those costs and refund ourselves. I believe you've already had at least one additional appropriation on a past agenda where we've had to bring those recouped fees back to a spendable condition through an additional appropriation. Private project inspection is very much the same way. Once this project has been approved by the town, we have to make sure that it's built in accordance with the plans and promises that they gave the town. Again, through our town contracted engineer, and at engineering and consultant rates, we pay for an inspector to be on these projects on a nearly daily basis or as needed. A very similar scenario develops when we have a public project, our own projects. And in this case, none of the engineering or inspection fees can be passed off. These are purely town expenses. So when we have a large project, we have no choice but to contract for full-time construction inspection. We don't have the capacity to put a staff person on a nearly daily basis on these large projects to make sure our contractors build our projects the way we want them to. The next two go very closely hand in hand, the ADA coordinator and an ADA transition plan. We currently have a transition plan, which was developed many years ago, which was an inventory of public assets to identify barriers to those who have challenges in mobility. This transition plan should be a very living and breathing document and updated regularly. It is the charge of the ADA coordinator, among other things, and who happens to currently be Wayne DeLong, who has no time in his life for anything other than his primary duties. But this transition plan needs to be living, breathing document, updated regularly. Now, I'm not suggesting that we are not compliant in these federal requirements, but we are minimally compliant. Our updates are basically a list of good things we did for the year tucked into the back of a binder with the thought that someday we'll compile this information and reorganize it. If we have trained and qualified individuals as in the form of engineers in-house, one of their tasks is going to be to make sure that our transition plan is the living, breathing document it needs to be, is updated regularly, thoroughly, and completely. The ERC stands for Employee and Responsible Charge. Every community who receives federal funding is required to have an employee with this certification. It is a one-time initial certification and then recertification on an annual basis. I've served in this capacity ever since it became a requirement through NDOT, but the addition again of in-house engineers, an organization that relies on one person is not as strong as an organization that has backup and redundancy. So this isn't the sole providence of an added engineer, but this will be a backup, a redundancy, so that any one person who's gone, someone else can stop and fill that void for vacation or whatever the reasons. Utility coordination. With all the projects the town has going on, you can see right now in the way of construction, there's probably 10 times that going on that you don't see that's initiated by the utilities, which by right can exist within our public rights of way, our public ways. So right now that right of way manager I spoke of earlier is one person who's trying to keep a handle on these hundreds of projects going in from all the various utilities throughout our community. And now these tasks may be range from the mundane to the very complex. It may be as simple as there is a pile of mulch that is problematic, but more typically this utility coordination is the water company comes in, they've got a leak, they fix it, and you don't see them for 6 months. Right now, we can review these permit applications so we know what they're going on, we file them digitally, but we don't have the capacity to follow up. We need to be able to follow up. And when they say they're going to be done, we need to have somebody out on that site inspecting to make sure that utility restored our infrastructure in a way that we expect. GIS data management. The town has a graphic information system that is basically a digitization of our built environment out there that brings that data to our desktop. So we have GIS, we have these digital layers as an inventory for all our assets out there. We need to use that tool better. We use it a great deal currently in the street and stormwater department, and I know other departments do as well. But we need to go out, capture more real-time data in our field so that we have a data layer for everything. We have a data layer for signs, and we know when that sign was replaced. We know when it was last inspected, when it was last conditioned. So again, much like the ADA efforts, we are certainly compliant with all our requirements, but gosh, we could be doing things so much better. And finally, I'll bring up cross-training. As I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of employees across a few departments that perform very similar tasks, but not identical. And with a nominal amount of cross-training, we can deepen that pool of employees who are able to perform tasks even outside their department. So under added capacities, what should we be doing? What can we be doing? What will we be doing? Number one is long-range planning. And I want to take a moment here to separate land use planning. We're talking about infrastructure planning. We're talking about capital project planning. The town has done a very good job in the past of visiting long-range planning on a reasonable schedule every 10 years or so. But what we have lacked because of capacity is to make that a guidance document instead of just a reference document. Instead of doing a long-range study and then putting it on the shelf, keeping it in the back of your mind, that needs to be pulled off on a regular basis. The importance of that task is for the funding. If you decide now we need something, so let's figure out how to pay for it, we're already behind the curve. So bringing in the engineering and the long-range planning for capital projects will allow you, this council, and future councils to better manage our funds to make sure that we have a project in the pipeline before we need it. In-house studies, most of you have probably heard already, requests for a stop sign. People are speeding here. We need a crosswalk there. All of these requests, both by local ordinance as well as state statutes, require an engineering study. Currently, we have no option but to find a consultant outside to answer even the simplest of questions. Do we need a new stop sign here? Is this a new stop sign warrant? We need to get that capacity in-house so that we can quickly respond to these requests in a low cost and accurate manner. Signal maintenance, you see signal maintenance and you might think, well, light bulbs and painting posts, but what I mean by signal maintenance are timings and performance evaluations. We need to have in-house the capacity to go out on any given day when someone calls in a problem at a signal so that we can be there Johnny on the spot and observe it. We can make those timing adjustments in the field. Right now, we have to outsource this to a signal technician. And by the time we can find someone, it's hard to recreate the situation that prompted the request in the first place. So getting these signal maintenance capacities in-house, I think, is going to really do a good job towards solving some of our existing traffic snarls that are signal driven. Impact fee review, currently, again, another service completely outsourced by the town. Every project that comes to the town is subject to a road impact fee, and residential projects are subject to a parks impact fee, 100% outsourced. Even these smaller contracts, and I want to say off the top of my head, this might be a $10,000 a year on-call contract. If we can eliminate these little $7,500, $10,000 a year contracts as needed on call, it's just going to add up to significant cost savings. Pre-filing project review is kind of a biggie, and it ties directly to the project review initially talked about under the support capacities. All these large projects that are filed with the town and then receive these pass-through expenses from our town engineer are entitled to a pre-filing project review. But with our current billing system, before the project is filed, we don't have a method to recoup any expenses. Now, pre-filing, that's not looking at everything in great detail. That is, do you have all your applications together? Does your content appear comprehensive and enough for you to go ahead and file? So if we have to bring in any engineering or other disciplines, the town has to absorb that cost. Again, in-house capacities will eliminate that cost. Ordinance management, speaking directly or specifically to streets, ordinances and technical standards, we have very old standards that are predicated on practices that go back to the 90s and perhaps even the 80s. And while we do need to take a comprehensive ordinance and technical standards look to upgrade things, this has to be an ongoing effort. There are continuously new technologies, markets, and standards being developed, and we need to make sure that we have those in place for our own benefit, so that when our developers come to us and give us a project, that they are building things in a reasonable, justified manner, but are going to produce the product that won't require public fund maintenance expenses for as long as possible. The last two, survey and CAD design, which I noted as a cost increase, those are really kind of a one-time increase. A surveyor can't survey without equipment. So I foresee us needing to set up equipment, set up shop for an engineer type to serve in these capacities. But survey is not just going out and surveying physically the field out there, which we need to do frequently, but it's also those things that go along with survey, like writing legal descriptions for easements, so that we know in the field and in the office, we know we have a piece of property, we know there's an easement through there, but if we can't describe it and talk about it and locate it, the knowledge doesn't do us any good. And finally, wrapping these things up is CAD, computer-aided design. And the benefits here are twofold. One is when these projects are brought into the town and the applications are made, sometimes there's no replacement for a big plan set that you can roll out, look at, feel, touch, dive into, and mark up. But we serve in that way largely like a teacher, which is turn in your test. We look at your test, we mark up a few mistakes, hand it back, and we make you retake the test. In-house CAD capabilities will allow a more interactive experience with our engineer and our applicant's engineer, so that we just don't have to grade a test. We can actually go through the test together and in real time make changes and explanations. So it really becomes more of an interactive than a judgment process when these applications come through the offices. And of course, internally, having computer-aided design capacity allows our engineers to design these smaller projects in-house, so that we can send them to contractors and have them bid out without going out for $500, $7,500, $10,000 small contracts. Okay, next slide, please. I'm sure you're glad to be off that one. We've talked a lot about engineering, and as an overview, all engineering services are currently outsourced to consultants. And that's everything from a large capital project like Zionsville Road down to these small one-offs, these in-house engineering studies, as-needed services, surveying, and legal descriptions. Now, I don't want to represent that we will be able to take all of the consultant services in-house, because consultants have great capacity and on-call contracts will be needed. But moving these services in-house will reduce costs, improve response times, increase capacities, and let us operate much more efficiently and thoroughly. So we're talking about finances, and this has been presented kind of subjective and without hard data. So let's take for a moment and look at some data that our finance department collected, which shows that we spent in each of 2018 and 2019 over $1.7 million each year with just our town contracted engineer. Now, granted, we have had some large projects, and that number is going to vary from year to year depending on how many projects and type of projects we have out. And of course, that $1.7 million also includes the Planning Commission Plan Department engineering needs, which are the pass-through expenses that we're trying to capture. But what this doesn't include is many of the other consultants we use each year for various trades and services. And that could be up to another $1 million a year, depending on the intensity of the projects we have. Now, usually those additional expenses are going to be in project inspection of our own projects. But like I said earlier, adding those capacities in-house, we can reduce the reliance on outside consultants and obviously consultant rates. So if we just kind of focus financially just on the quantified town engineer expenses of around 1.7. It is our conservative goal and expectation, which we believe to be more than achievable, to reduce our engineering expenses to a town engineer by 20% or more each year. 20% is our starting point. So of the 1.7 million, 20% is about $340,000. Obviously, added staff comes with a cost. And we estimate that in the 2021 budget request for your consideration later on this year, we would have about 243 in employee expenses for salaries and benefits. So just that high level, kind of exclusive of all else overview would allow us to anticipate a $100,000 savings, beginning in year one, and I only see that increasing as more functions are brought in-house. Not to mention, I'm going to keep harping on the added capacity benefits that are cost neutral that we've talked about previously. And of course, this doesn't even take into consideration the options that the planning department is considering, which is to adjust or raise application fees to make sure all costs are covered. And instead of passing those along to consultants, we will be able to retain those fees in-house. So kind of to wrap up the engineering discussion here, I can't overstate the importance and benefits of kind of the walk down the hall work environment. We all face daily challenges, questions, and issues that we need these professionals, we need our coworkers to bounce these ideas off of so that we can give timely, quick responses to the people, to our customers, to our public when they consult with us. We do obviously see some public benefits going here. Obviously, we wouldn't do this based purely on a cost savings. We want to be able to better serve our customers. We see that this will reduce application and permit review times by streamlining this process in-house with a single town engineer who works for the town, and offer a clarity of progress or process. So that people say, well, where is my permit? What do I need? Where are we staying on the review? What else can I do to help myself? Instead of having to go offsite, find the consultant, coordinate an answer with them, we will have our staff, our team daily available to answer these questions to our customers. Next slide, please. Yes, the slide I'm sure you are all looking forward to. So obviously this is your meeting this evening, and I am here for any dialogue that you may want to have this evening. And the presentation is gone, and now we're looking at us again. So please send your questions that you may develop as you contemplate this over the course of the next few days or weeks to Amy Lacey, so that our team can respond thoroughly and completely. And I've just gone through a lot of my perspectives on this, perhaps ad nauseum. But again, at issue this evening is the ordinance, and it is for the creation of a Department of Public Works as a single department overseeing the divisions and creating the leadership positions therein. Of course, all the added staffing that was referenced is, of course, subject to funding approval by this board under future actions. But I'm really hopeful that we can achieve this structure quickly. We spent too long kicking something down the road that we've long discussed, going so far as mentioned to establish this in our last reorganization ordinance. So I'm ready to begin the cost savings and what I see as tremendous in-house capacity increases as a result of this. I'm enthused by this proposed organizations and the initiatives that it will support to build and guide our community how we want to be, where we want to go. And I'm humbled to be tasked with its creation, or at least be part of its creation, because we're not often presented with an opportunity to create a legacy. And that's what I see here. I really look forward to this next evolution of an orchestrated, purposeful, and efficient governance. So I've talked long enough. Thank you for your time. I will return your meeting to you and stand by to support however I may.
Very good, Mr. Lance. Number 7 was my favorite slide. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, anything to add before I unleash council? There's a lot of information to consume with questions. Both seem good. Okay. Councilors, I assume you have some questions about this. So feel free to
Can I ask a clarifying question, just because at the very end there was, along the financials, there was quite a bit of information given. So just one simple question to start off with. I don't want to monopolize the time, but you talked about a 20% estimated reduction in the outsourced engineering costs, but then that would be offset by additional employee salary and benefits. So the total savings was, did you say about $100,000 per year, or was it?
Yes, that was what our high level analysis and goals led us to. But I will reiterate that that only considered the amount of money we spend with our contracted town engineer. We have multiple other consultants that are performing these one-off tasks as an as-needed basis. We did not get into the weeds to look at those, but those are the little $10,000 here and there contracts that we believe can be completely eliminated by bringing that capacity in-house. So yes, this is an exercise of targets and goals and objectives, and that's what we've identified as our first year goal.
Lance, do you know what, Councilor Plunkett here, do you know what the total budget is for this department?
I do not off the top of my head. That is being refined and concluded by Tammy in our finance department in preparation of conversations with you. I beginning next week. This is a budget preparation process like no other. Tammy has added a lot of great new perspective on how to formulate and create our budgets on an annual basis. Then again, looking ahead on the outlook as well. So when we sit down with you in the very near future to discuss this budget, you will see these expenses broken out by department. So it basically will take, you will no longer see an MVH street type department. There's going to be a lot in the Department of Public Works. So the short answer is you will have that answer in the very near future.
Lance, really quick, Councilor Choi mentioned budgeting or the 20% savings. So in theory, does that mean, back in the napkin math, we're still spending $1.4 million with our outsourced engineering firm? And is that because they are offering specialized engineering services for one-off projects that we wouldn't insource? I guess my question is, I'm surprised the savings weren't more.
Well, I didn't want to present something to you that was completely unattainable. And like I said, this is a new endeavor for the town. So we want to go into this with realistic expectations. Initially, my number was much higher than that. But to your point, there are always disciplines that must be outsourced. There are always specialties. Same with lawyers, same with any professional service. We can't ever bring the capacity in-house to match a 120 employee engineering firm. And within that engineering firm, there are always going to be those specialties that we will need. So that's why we took a very conservative approach and identified 20% reduction as our target, because we know there's a lot of simple stuff. We're trying to capture that simple stuff that basically anybody who's graduated with an engineering degree can accomplish.
But what happens with the utilities engineering that is, I assume, much different than the roads and stormwater engineering? Is that going to be insourced? Is that going to use the same firm as the streets? Is that going to retain its own autonomy for what they need? How does that work?
Well, as I mentioned, larger projects are not going to be tasked to these new engineers. Large design projects, those are going to continue on, and I see us retaining, as I mentioned, on-call service type contracts that we can pick up when we need to fill our gaps, when the specialties of our staff aren't there. So your question was utilities engineering, that's largely still going to remain outsourced because of its technical nature. But again, if we can just reduce 20% the need to outsource that engineering, we're at our target.
And you said utilities engineering. I was more referring to wastewater engineering. Are you talking about the same thing effectively? Utility being the wastewater is a public utility.
Currently, there is no engineering done by the wastewater department staff or any staff townwide. That's all outsourced. So that is part of that 20% capture that we're targeting to reduce their need to outsource engineering services down to by 20% or at the 80%.
Lance, this is Joe Culp. Quick question: do you have job descriptions for these engineer positions, like what you're looking for?
We do not have them fully developed
Okay.
because this is still subject to your approval. And
Okay.
while we feel confident that our team is going to advance this effort, upon your approval of this, should you choose to do so, then we will forge full steam ahead in the creation of job descriptions.
Well, you said, I think earlier that it'd be about $240,000 in total cost for these. Did you say 2 positions?
Yes.
All right. So what's I guess my question is for our neighboring communities, how competitive are these jobs going to be? I mean, these going to be hard jobs to find, to hire, to retain?
I don't believe so. I have talked to our peer communities who have engineering departments, and I guess I want to be a little reserved rather than show our hand here, assuming we're going to be hiring these individuals. But we had a division director engineer, which would be a head of engineering, and then a staff engineer position.
Okay.
243 contemplates competitive salaries with other municipalities and a 35% overhead for benefits, health insurance, et cetera. So we're never going to be, as no community, no municipality is likely going to be competitive with a department head engineer at a large firm, but we are aligned perfectly with the municipal market.
Okay, fair enough. I was just curious.
Lance, this is Alex Choi again. I'm hoping this isn't a silly question, but with where you are spaced currently, with the addition of with more personnel, I remember visiting the building and it's a little antiquated, and we had before us a proposal last year before I was on town council for a new building to house them. Is this going to accelerate those plans then for a new facility to house the whole department in? Or what's going to happen along that line?
Sure, not a silly question at all. Very good question. This will not accelerate the need for a new facility where we're currently housed. There is currently capacity in town hall to house. We're not talking a high number of employees here. We're talking 2 to 3 to support this DPW, which includes the engineering division. So we are looking to repurpose the available space at town hall to get these people on board quickly without incurring capital costs to displace others.
Lance, another question. In your budget for this, will there be increases in the current folks that'll be moving into more of a management supervisory role, or are they all going to be kind of where they are now?
No, the budget will contemplate increases in salaries for those employees who have added duties and responsibilities.
Okay, so that would impact that $100,000, correct, in additional costs?
No, that's kind of a separate. Well, yes, I can see your point. Yeah, it would, but it's not. These aren't massive. These are slightly above cost of living type increases that we're talking.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Thank you.
Lance, I have another question, Councilor Plunkett. I'm just looking at from the last couple of years budgets that both you and Barry submitted, and there were engineering line items in there of basically about $250,000 budgeted for this year. I'm sensitive to the fact that we've had a lot of projects, so 1.7 compared to $250,000, obviously that's a big jump. You mentioned not having the budget or the money coming from the MVH funds. Where is the money going to come from? Do we know?
Yeah, and that's kind of a tricky question to answer, because in the past, the Motor Vehicle Highway Fund is created at the state level to receive directly. And if Tammy's on here, I will certainly entertain her interjection as I begin to speak budgets and finances. But we've done things our own way for a number of years. So when you have seen a motor vehicle highway budget that is $2.5 to $3 million, the only portion of that is required MVH that comes from the state is the gasoline tax sorry, everything, all screens started timing out, is the gasoline tax and state distributions. Last year, I believe that was right around $800,000. The state said, here's your MVH fund. The reason that fund has been so robust in the past is council has taken all of town revenues and put them in a single bucket and propped up the MVH. The new budget approach, which Tammy has been developing, is going to take a new and more appropriate look. So you take a tax dollar and you've got to hear, you've been going, this goes in MVH. We're going to give this to MVH as a local contribution. The new structure is going to leave that MVH fund alone and let it house the funds that it's intended to house from the state, that are allocations from the state. And now we're going to take that dollar and put it in the general fund because we're all operating under a general fund. So that's why you're going to see these expenses come out of a different fund, because we are not choosing locally to artificially prop up the MVH just to make it look more. We're going to take, this is general fund. It's got to pay for everything. So let's leave it where it belongs. So same pot of money, it's just going to reallocate the buckets that we've always been used to.
Lance, in that regard, if you think about sewer rates, sewer funding for wastewater, what is to prevent, if it's all going in the general fund in this new format, you know, this mayor, future mayors, this council, future councils, from using that as a piggy bank for other projects? And when wastewater has a need, whether it's a new plant or to add sewer connections or anything else that really should have been spent for that, find themselves short, and us as a council having to raise sewer rates to cover that. What protections are in there with this format?
Okay, this is essentially the same funding scenario when it's specific to wastewater as it is now. This does not raid wastewater. It does not take wastewater funds and put that into general funds. The wastewater is a fee-driven, user-based budget that is in and of itself. Now, there are a couple of contributions that wastewater can make across the board, which have always been made and will likely continue to be. That being, they pay for a building inspector, because that building inspector is focused on sanitary. So there has to be, with the existing staff, if it's going to be spent outside of the utility proper, they have to be receiving some service from that employee. I have some staff members for whom 8% of their salary is paid by wastewater. That is justified because we respond to sewer backup emergencies and we perform routine cleaning. So we provide a service. So this structure does not alter in any way. It doesn't make it easier or harder for future iterations of councils to raid utility funds, but you're going to have to answer to the public if you've got a utility rate increase. And I've been through a few of those, and boy, people will come out of the woodwork for $2 a month. So those are heavily scrutinized. And this scenario doesn't alter the way the utility funds itself, because if the utility does not receive any tax dollars, but it contributes to services to town employees that are justified.
And I can step in here, Tammy Habbard. And so when Lance is talking about the general fund and MVH, that is separate from the enterprise funds. So wastewater is a separate utility and will remain in a separate fund supported by user fees. So it will not be commingled in the general fund. So there is a separation there and will continue to be a separation there. And we have 2 hours to talk about this next week. And I'm really excited to be able to present all this to you guys. But just to give a plug for the budget workshop. So the budget will be restructured and hopefully in a way that is better understood by the public. And so by centralizing the activity and for taking out activity that is not street related, that is in the MBH currently, then I think for reporting purposes to the state on road activity, MBH LRS, then we can better allocate and be able to explain the budget. So we are going to departmentalize all of the budgets so that you guys will be able to see. In the past, we've had several departments that were combined in as administration. So we're going to separate planning, we're going to separate HR, we're going to separate out finance and records so that you guys will have a better picture. So when Lance is talking about public works, it will cross several funds. But overall, structurally, reporting wise, that's the org chart that you're seeing. So operationally, it is different than how the budget will be. So wastewater will have its own budget. And then the divisions of public works will be separated between the general fund and MVH LRS. So you'll be able to see those different. Stormwater will be a different department within the general fund. So all of that will be laid out for you guys, and you guys can ask me any questions on that. But structurally, what Lance presented tonight was the plan for how the department will function. And then the budget side is slightly different and modified based on what you said about the funding sources being different. Then we're going to treat them differently.
Very good, Tammy. Thank you. That helps. Lance, I assume with the reorg, this doesn't change any of the regulatory utility things associated with the wastewater treatment plant, correct? This is just a town thing we're doing, not a, by putting it under a department of, by putting it under a department, it is still regulated by the state as a utility, correct?
Correct. We can only manage those things that were afforded to under state statute locally. So this is a local decision on how we are going to administer and orchestrate ourselves. We can't usurp any of the state regulations governing utilities and their operations.
Very good. I'm sorry for all the questions. I had one other kind of, well, I had two more. One is you sort of mentioned real quickly this idea of facilities management and talking about mowing. Does that include parks mowing, or is that just for town-owned facilities mowing? Does parks have its own mowing contract, or is that now fall under a facilities manager in this board?
Obviously, parks is not part of this organization, but it would be our intent to work closely with them, and we have been, when we look to consolidate our contracts, because right now you got 3 or 4 departments who have some staff mowing and have some consultant, some contractor mowing. So you got eight entities out there mowing. This will look to align those services so we can put out one request for bids or quotes for townwide services. Now there's always the specialty things that need to be exempted. Golf course, you're not going to necessarily get someone mowing greens, but to the extent that we can, we want to bring all this outsourced work together under a single contract, so it's of more value to a contractor, and thus hopefully get us a better price. The old economies of scale.
My other question, if I think a recent project we just completed, Zionsville Road, which I think looks very nice. Kudos to you and your staff for how that turned out. How would this change impact something like that? Would it be quicker? Would it be cheaper? I know there were some utilities things we had to deal with. Would this new utilities coordinator help there? Could you maybe contextualize something that is tangible with what you're proposing?
Sure. It'll be cheaper. And the biggest cost savings on a project like that is going to be realized through the construction inspection process. The fact that we have to have someone assigned to keep the contractors honest. Not that they're dishonest, but we got to make sure that they're giving us the product that we expect. So right now that is 100% outsourced, and the inspector that we contract with, regardless of the firm, is likely going to have 3 or 4 other projects. So if we have something that comes up on a project that needs immediate attention, we either have to locate that person or find someone else or let the problem go for a little bit. We will be able to reduce those inspection costs tremendously. That 20% we're targeting is that broad across the board. When we get to a construction inspection, I would expect that to be more in the lines of 50% of what we've been paying outside contractors to inspect our projects. So Nothing would have expedited that project, or certainly nothing that we could have controlled on the Zionsville Road project, but we would have reduced our expenses if we had an in-house engineer who was available on a daily basis, and we would have entered into a much lesser value contract with an outside contractor for their services.
All right. So I've got a question here. A lot of what we're talking about is the potential cost savings to the town overall for the combination into a DPW. So, but we don't have the budget, and I understand two different processes. I get that, but I'm always thinking worst case scenario. So worst case scenario, we pass like the ordinance for the DPW, and then we get to the budgeting stage, and we as a council go, wow, that doesn't work for us, whatever. Where are we at that point? Can we roll it back? Do we have to live with it? I'm just thinking, because we don't have the solid numbers yet to know, so we're kind of going on faith here.
Yeah, and the point I made earlier, there's really no cost to reorganize the employees we have and operate a little bit differently to gain efficiencies. The added expenses are going to be in the added personnel. So if we get to the budget process and it doesn't support 2 engineers, maybe there's only 1, maybe we can't implement a new employee yet, then we just kind of go on business as usual. But we don't roll back this structure. We put this structure in place. So if we can't afford it right now, as soon as we can, the framework is there and we move into it. So adopt the framework. You still hold the purse strings on all the positions. So, really no harm, no foul initially. And hopefully, like I said, we can fund all these efforts.
All right. So it'd just be, don't fund, or we wouldn't be able to fund the new positions potentially.
Right.
Councilors, any other questions?
We've been, it's just a comment. I know that we've been focused a little bit on what the cost savings would be, which is important. But I think one of the things that you iterated in this conversation, which is just as meaningful, if not more meaningful, is your statement that this would add efficiencies and overall satisfaction to the residents of Zionsville. And even if it costs a little more, that would be beneficial in and of itself. But it's icing on the cake that we're going to actually realize some cost savings on this. So kudos to you, the mayor, the deputy mayor, for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
So if there are no other questions, then I would echo Councilor Choi's thought process there. Obviously this took a lot of work and a lot of thinking, and so I'm appreciative of that. I think council has got a lot of new information today from your presentation, Mr. Lance. And in that presentation, it said we should send questions to Amy Lacey, and I think there will be more that will come up. We also, in sort of relation to Vice President Traylor's comment and what Tammy mentioned earlier, have a budget workshop next week to see the impact of this has and sort of tie those together. And with this new information and the questions answered in the budget workshop, it may allow, I think it will allow me, I would say, and maybe other councilors, to start contextualizing what this ordinance is doing to that additional information. My recommendation to this council is that we don't vote on this ordinance tonight and continue it to the next meeting. Per the presentation, send our questions in. There may be some tweaks that we want to make or things that we want clarified on, and then put this on for old business for next meeting. So I would make a motion to continue it. If there is a second on that idea. There's a second on that. Before I ask for a vote, are there any other questions on that or concerns with that? I don't want to plow forward if any councilor is uncomfortable with that process.
If I may, perhaps Heather Willie could speak to this. This is an ordinance, so this is as always, it's a 2-step process. It's an introduction at a meeting and then action at a subsequent meeting. So I don't know that it would be to say not vote on it tonight. You may consider introducing this so it has its first option your first presentation, and then you can take action or not take action at any subsequent meeting. I don't know. Heather, you might speak to the process that would best set us up for implementation if the council so chooses.
Yeah, I guess, Lance, thank you for that. If we are going to make any changes to this ordinance, or if there'd be a consideration for changes based on the cost or based on the structure that was presented, I would recommend to the council that they hold it and then come back for first reading. So if there's any changes that need to be made, it's made as part of that process, and that it's not amended, after it's been sort of published for the public. And either way, I think is fine. You could hold it on the agenda, but I think there'll be an expectation that you're voting on the substance that was presented tonight. So if the council, wants to have further exploration or maybe ask some questions about some of the positions, I might hold it and then have additional conversation at a future meeting for first reading.
Thanks, Heather.
Yeah, and I would say, just as added context for council, I'm not necessarily opposed to this type of arrangement so much as, you don't build a house without knowing what you're going to spend. I'd like to know what this is going to look like, and understanding that the idea is we're saving a little bit of cash on some other employees. I think that's great, but then we go right into, well, if we can't afford it, then it just doesn't get funded, and it gets implemented when we can fund it. I feel like we're kind of getting the cart before the horse here, and I'd like to see the numbers.
To that conversation about pushing this off to the mayor, the deputy mayor, or to Lance, is there urgency in having the first reading approved today, or is I didn't know if there were any issues with that.
I would defer to the mayor. This was her project, her vision, her goal. I'm here to serve the mayor and that office and you. So you should all take this at the timeline with which you feel most comfortable.
Mayor, I think you're on
You're
mute.
muted, Mayor.
There we go.
We definitely want to make sure that every single one of you have all of your questions answered, and that you've got the data in front of you to make an informed vote. It is fine with us to defer this for, until the next meeting. We would like to also include this structure in our budget process until we're told that that's not an okay thing to do. So I think if you don't mind us being aspirational and continuing to believe this is the right choice, and that you all will see that in the numbers as well, we'll go ahead and march forward with our budget process, envisioning a Department of Public Works, and make sure that you get all the information that you need for the next council hearing to review.
And Mayor, to that
supportive
point,
of that.
Yep, thanks, Councilor Choi. Mayor, to that point, with that budget workshop next week, would we see that then to help kind of answer these unknown questions? I think it makes sense. That way we're more informed as well.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And Josh, if to the point about reintroducing at the next council meeting, we could at that point, if we all feel like it's appropriate, then even I realize you got an introductory reading, and then we would have multiple steps there, but we could even suspend the rules on some of this, right? If we really felt it needed to be done immediately.
Yes, if there was a time crunch, we would have the ability to still get this done in a single meeting. Yeah, that's a good point, Councilor Fulton.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate you joining us tonight. Lance, thanks for your time. Julie, thanks for sharing the presentation. So I made a motion to continue this. I second from Councilor Plunkett. So a motion and a second is on there. Amy, do you want a roll call and vote on that motion? Amy, you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
President Garrett.
Yes.
Vice President Traylor.
Yes.
Councilor Burke. Did I lose Councilor Burke?
Brad, can you reaffirm that? I heard a yes from him.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Choi.
Yes.
Councilor Culp.
Yes.
Councilor Melton.
Yes.
And Counselor Plunkett?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Motion to continue is approved by 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Next up, we have a resolution declaring an economic development area and approving an application for personal property tax abatement. This is for MWI Animal Health. This is resolution 2020-12. I have a number of people listed here to speak. Tom Wakefield, Director of Operations for MWI Animal Health, will be presenting, and Leslie Wagner and Aaron Head of Genovis will assist with questions.
Okay, and I will get them promoted here.
Very good.
Okay, should have everyone.
Very good. So, Mr. Wakefield, the floor is yours.
All right, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I'm used to using my wife's iPad for the Zooming stuff, so this is new for me. First, I wanted to thank the town council and especially Wayne DeLong. He's been instrumental in assisting with this. I am Tom Wakefield, Director of Operations for MWI. We're excited about this in Zionsville. The company, basically, if you've got a pet, you've got a 50-50 shot you're using products that we've shipped. If you've got a farm, you've got a 50-50 shot of using our products as well. We've been in Whitestown, I think, for close to 10 years now, maybe 9 years. We're currently in a 70,000 square foot building. We've actually had to move accounts out. And we've looked in Whitestown, Plainfield, Indianapolis, and Zionsville to locate what will ultimately be a building that's a little more than two times the size of our current operation and 3 times cube space for the operation. We've grown tremendously. Capital investment's going to be around $6 million in total. It would be moving about 175 jobs to Zionsville, 50 of those being new over the next 8 to 10 years. Average wage would be close to $18, which is about $4 higher than the county average for similar positions. Again, I mentioned we looked in Whitestown, Plainfield, Zionsville, and Indianapolis for this opportunity. Ironically, even though we're in Whitestown, Zionsville, the building we are hopefully moving into here is a stone's throw away from our current building, which was a very low impact for our current employee base, which was really important to us. That's it in a nutshell. And I'm really just here to answer any questions and any other things you might need from us.
Appreciate it, Mr. Wakefield, and appreciate your interest in Zionsville. I'm going to give you a hard one, and I apologize. But you mentioned you were in Whitestown for 9 years, and typically these tax abatements are 10 years. A lot of folks will ask, well, gee, are we just going to give a 10-year tax abatement and you're going to go move across the street to Lebanon in 10 years? Any comment on that type of theory?
Wrong button. There we go. No, that's a great question. The beautiful part of the building we're moving into is, I believe we've got a right of first refusal on an additional 45,000 square feet. So the building is actually 190,000 square feet. The current footprint and cube space, and I know I keep bringing up cube space, it's 32 clear versus 24 clear, and that makes a big difference in terms of the cube utilization for us. So we can literally grow an additional amount into that new space that we have a what they call a demising wall that we've erected in that space, so we can move right out to that space. So we've got not only, if I were to move my building today, I will go from, in essence, 95% full to about 60% full. So we should be good for probably, 15 years potentially at a minimum. So I hear what you're saying. It's a great question. But yeah, we should be in good shape.
And pardon my ignorance, is cube space vertical? In other words, you can go 32 cube high, or what measurement relative to size is that? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so the current building we're in is 24, what they call 24-foot clear, meaning we can go up to about 24 feet, and in the new building, we can go up to 32 clear. So we've got a much larger cube to utilize.
Got it. We need some new forklifts for that extra space. Go higher.
Yeah, we're getting all new forklifts.
Oh, good, good. That was the only question I had. Counselors, any questions here? I will thank, congrats on your success. That's great, and your continued success.
And you may have mentioned this, but forgive me. How long have you been in your current location?
You're still on mute.
There it goes.
There we go.
Sorry. I believe I've been there for 3 years. I believe they've been there for 9 or 10 years. It may be 11. I just don't know the exact timeline. I apologize.
Any other questions?
I have a question just about the, specifically about the abatement schedule. And maybe just from a council discussion. This is a little bit different than the ones that we've voted on in the past. Is there any reason to deviate from what we've historically done?
I think, Jason, the schedules that you're referring to, and I may be wrong, are the property tax abatements that go into the development of the structure. This is a personal property abatement that would be paid directly by the tenant, in this case, NWI Animal Health, which is more of a straight line abatement as opposed to the graduated abatements that we've seen in the property tax abatements, unless you're referencing projects from a couple years ago.
That was good. It's good.
Well, I would entertain a motion on this.
Oh, this is just a comment from me about the tax abatements. It's just in answer to, we had a speaker earlier with Mr. Triscari talking about tax giveaways again. And so just for those in the residents of Zionsville listening in, and for those who are listening on recordings later on, these kind of tax abatements, just for your education, and we all know this, but are meant to put us in a competitive area so that we can attract business to Zionsville. We are all competing for businesses to come to our municipalities. So this is not a tax giveaway, it's being competitive. I just wanted to clarify that. I know all of us are in agreement with that.
And if
Right. And without it, we'd miss out 100%.
Right. If I might just add too, in this particular situation, this was a play for MWI Animal Health to invest here in Central Indiana. Tom Wakefield really had to work hard to convince his company that Central Indiana is where they needed to grow. And but for the support of the council and the Zionsville community, this capital investment may not be happening. So this was a really critical component. We appreciate your support.
Good job, Tom.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Wakefield, and appreciate the big Cubs W behind you as well.
Hey, thanks. You can Google me later and see why it's there. Something to do with the World Series.
Yeah.
You're not Bartman, are you?
Sorry?
It's a bad joke. I was talking about the old Cubs. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve. Any seconds?
I'll second that.
I saw Councilor Plunkett before I heard Councilor Culp. Sorry, Joe. A second from Councilor Plunkett. Amy, do you want to roll through this? You're on mute.
Sure.
There you go.
President Garrett?
Yes.
Okay. Vice President Traylor?
Yes.
Councilor Burke?
Yes.
Councilor Choi?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Culp?
Yes.
Councilor Melton?
Yes.
And Councilor Plunkett?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, Tom and Cubs ring bearer, we welcome you and your company to Zionsville. Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you. And if you know people, I've got about 20 openings still. So feel free to send them my way.
For sure.
Very good.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the
Thank
time.
you. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, and just to formalize that, resolution number 2020-12, declaratory resolution and approval of tax abatement application passes with a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Next, we've got approval of claims. Council, you may have seen an email come through very late where there was an additional claim added that should have been on there. It was just left off by mistake. That was for the chamber. And so if you've got any questions on that, feel free to ask right now, but otherwise claims are as you saw originally. Craig?
So that's a payback to money that the chamber spent on our behalf? Is that how to understand that?
I believe it was an agreement that the town had with the chamber to help facilitate the Night on the Bricks. And it was a reimbursement for expenses associated with that.
Would you like me to bring back Tammy and Allison or Allison?
I'll defer to Councilor Melton if you wanted more details on that.
I was just making sure that if this money was the allotment or was not the allotment.
It was not the allotment. This was just a reimbursement for the Night on the Bricks. Because last year the allotment was a budgeted item. As far as what we budget for the chamber, this is not a part of that. Because quite frankly, last year when we were doing budgeting, we had no idea that the pandemic was going to happen and that we were going to need the Night on the Bricks to support the local retailers. So this is just us contributing to the good cause.
Thank you.
I have just a question, a couple of things about claims in general. Do we know if we have an amount of money that's related to COVID that we're going to try to recoup? I know that was part of the deal. We were trying to ask people to track expenses and track that stuff. Do we have a number that we would be going back to try to get cash for or no?
Maybe not to put her on the spot is.
Yeah, I just brought Tammy back.
Yeah, very good. Tammy, sorry to put you on the spot. I'm not sure if you heard Councilor Plunkett's question there related to COVID.
Yes, I did. So far we have submitted and successfully received $72,000 in CARES Act money for PPE, telework, and some other expenses. We will be going before you shortly on some other activities.
Thank you. And then the last thing I'll just add, I know I hate to be a squeaky wheel here, but I brought this up before to the council. Our budgeted legal fees for 2020 are $366,000. And if we approve these claims, we'll be at $387,000, which means we're tying into our $100,000 legal fee reserve. And at this rate, our legal fees will be over budgeted by October claims. Just so that we're all aware of that.
Tammy, to Councilor Plunkett's point there, what happens in that scenario that legal fees, whether they're council administrative or others, start exceeding the budget? Where does the mayor, where does council start looking at to pull from to cover those? Obviously, we still have to pay for those fees. Ms. Willie will be happy to hear that.
So when we do the budget, the four main categories that council is approving within each of the funds is for the personnel, the supplies, services, and capital. Legal fees are included in the services category. So we would look to first pull from other service lines within that. And then from there, we would look within the department. And then from there, we would look from other funds, but usually within those services lines, if one line is overspent, usually you can find other lines that are underspent. As we all know, when you create a budget, then there are things that happen that were not expected. And then the other way around, you expected to do something and then you were not able to do it. So generally, that's how it works with the budgeting. If there is an additional beyond what we can do within the appropriation that was given last year in October, then we would go to council for an additional appropriation in those lines.
And when you say an additional appropriation, this will probably be a good discussion at the budget workshop.
Yeah.
Are you talking about moving from within one of those 4 pockets that you described, personnel, supplies, services, and capital?
So those would be transfers from one category to another. And so that would just be a transfer and not an additional appropriation, as long as you're not exceeding the total amount that was set forth in the budget process. So for a fund, if that full fund amount over all the categories is not exceeded, you would not need to do an additional appropriation.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Tammy before we approve claims, or vote to approve claims, I should say? All right, I will make a motion to approve claims.
Okay.
Second from Councilor Burke. Amy?
Okay, President Garrett,
Yes.
Vice President Trailer,
Yes.
Councilor Burke,
I didn't hear you, Councilor Burke.
Yes.
All
Thank
right.
you. Councilor Choi,
Yes.
Councilor Culp,
Yes.
Councilor Melton,
Yes.
Councilor Plunkett.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good. Claims are approved by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Anyone want to do the honor of making a motion to adjourn if there are no other matters?
Motion to adjourn.
First from Councilor Choi,
Second.
second from Vice President Trailer. Amy, last time.
President Garrett
Yes.
and Vice President Trailer,
Yes.
Councilor Burke,
Yes.
Councilor Choi,
Yes.
Councilor Culp,
Yes.
Councilor Melton,
Yes.
Councilor Plunkett.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. We are adjourned by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. The next regular town council meeting is scheduled for Monday, September 21st, 2020 at 7:30 a.m. This will be an electronic meeting, hopefully our last electronic meeting. A notice will be posted in compliance with the Indiana Open Door Law, and a Zoom link will be provided in the meeting notice, as well as being able to watch on YouTube. Appreciate everyone's time tonight. I know that was a little bit longer than usual. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Good evening, everybody.